You did it again. You opened the app, scrolled for maybe 30 seconds, and suddenly your life felt smaller. Not because anything bad happened to you today, but because something good happened to someone else. That feeling, that quiet sinking drop in your chest, has a name. And the name is not jealousy, not insecurity, not some modern disease caused by smartphones. The name is social comparison. And it is so deeply wired into what you are as a human being that removing it would require removing the part of your brain that kept your ancestors alive. Here is what almost nobody tells you. Comparing yourself to other people is not a flaw. It is a feature. It was engineered into your nervous system over hundreds of thousands of years, long before there were highlights reels or salary databases or Instagram grids. And understanding why it exists, really understanding it, will change the way you experience it for the rest of your life. Start with a forest, not a metaphor, an actual forest, roughly 150,000 years ago, somewhere in what is now sub-Saharan Africa. You are there. Your group is small, maybe 40, 50 people. You have known every single face in it since birth. You know who is stronger than you. You know who is faster. You know who the group listens to when it matters and who gets ignored. You know exactly where you rank. And that knowledge is not vanity. That knowledge is survival. In that environment, your position in the social hierarchy determined almost everything. Whether you ate well or ate last. Whether you made it or didn't. Whether you were protected in conflict or left exposed. Whether your children survived or didn't. Knowing where you stood relative to others was not a luxury. It was the single most important piece of data you could hold in your head at any given moment. So your brain built a system to track it constantly, automatically, without you having to think about it. Psychologists call this social comparison theory, and the man who first formally described it was a social psychologist named Leon Festinger. In 1954, Festinger published research arguing that humans have a fundamental drive to evaluate their own opinions and abilities, and that when objective measures are unavailable, they evaluate themselves by comparing to other people. He was right, but even he could not have predicted how deep the wiring goes. Because what Festinger described as a cognitive tendency, neuroscientists have since found encoded in actual brain architecture. Studies using functional MRI, including landmark research from a team at the California Institute of Technology, led by Ming Hao, have shown that your brain responds to relative wealth and social standing in the same neural regions that process physical pain and reward. Not similar regions, the same ones. Falling behind someone activates pain circuitry. Pulling ahead activates pleasure circuitry. Your brain is literally built to feel social comparison in your body, and it does not turn off. That is the part that makes this so hard to live with. The comparison system was designed for a world where your social group was the entire world, 40 to 50 people. That was the ceiling. You could be ranked last in your group and still be completely unaware that somewhere, 1,000 miles away, someone was faster, richer, more admired than anyone you had ever met. That person did not exist in your psychological reality, so they could not hurt you. Now think about what you handed your brain when you gave it the internet. Suddenly, your comparison pool did not contain 50 people. It contained 8 billion. And your brain, which still runs on ancient hardware, began doing exactly what it was built to do. It began scanning, ranking, updating, constantly. It began treating a stranger's wedding photos as data about your own romantic standing. It began treating a colleague's promotion post as information about your own career trajectory. It began treating the body of someone you have never met as a measurement of your own physical worth. The software was written for a village. You installed it in a stadium. This is why social media makes the comparison problem worse in a very specific way. It is not simply that you are exposed to more people. It is that you are exposed to a curated, filtered, highlight reel version of those people, while having full access to your own unedited interior life. Researcher Sherry Turkle at MIT spent decades studying the psychological effect of digital self-presentation, and her findings return again and again to the same asymmetry. You compare your behind the scenes to everyone else's opening night. You know about your anxiety, your failed attempts, your bad mornings. You see only their best moments. The comparison was already unfair. The internet made it structurally impossible to be fair. But here is where it gets more interesting, because not all comparison is equal. Festinger's original framework identified two types: upward comparison and downward comparison. Upward comparison is when you measure yourself against someone who appears to be doing better. Downward comparison is when you measure yourself against someone doing worse. And psychologists have found something counterintuitive buried inside this framework. Downward comparison feels good in the short term, momentarily better. But it does not motivate, it soothes. It is the comparison equivalent of pain relief. It reduces the ache without fixing the problem. Upward comparison, on the other hand, can go one of two directions depending entirely on how your brain processes it. If your brain reads the upward comparison as a threat, as proof that you are losing, falling behind, permanently outranked, it generates anxiety, envy, and paralysis. But if your brain reads the same comparison as information, as evidence of what is possible, it generates something closer to motivation and inspiration. The scene is identical. The difference is interpretation. And that interpretation is something you can actually change. Researchers Ellen Langer and Judith Rodin demonstrated in their famous nursing home study that perceived control has a profound effect on human psychological outcomes. Their work was specifically about autonomy and aging, but the principle generalizes. When you believe you have agency over your situation, the same conditions that produce helplessness instead produce growth. The stick figure in your mind seeing someone more successful than them can read that image one of two ways: a threat or a map. But even knowing that, even understanding the neuroscience and the evolutionary backstory, the feeling does not simply stop, and it is worth asking why. The answer is that comparison is not just a survival tool, it is also a meaning-making tool. You use other people as reference points because you are a deeply social creature who has almost no objective measurement of your own worth. Think about what you would have to know to objectively assess yourself. Every person on Earth, every possible version of your own life, every counterfactual outcome you might have had under different choices. You do not have access to any of that. So your brain does the only rational thing it can do. It uses available data. It looks at the people around you and triangulates. That triangulation is clumsy and often painful. But it is the best your biology can do. Psychologist Abraham Maslow understood this without the benefit of modern neuroscience. His hierarchy of needs placed esteem, both self-esteem and the esteem of others, above basic survival but below self-actualization. What that ordering implies is something quietly radical. That comparison is not a detour from human development. It is a stage of it. You are supposed to care about how you rank. You are supposed to feel the pull of what others have. The question is not whether you will compare. The question is what you do with the comparison when it arrives. And here is where your ancient wiring and your modern mind can actually work together for once. The comparison impulse evolved to help you understand your position in a group so that you could respond appropriately. Move up, learn a skill, build an alliance, shift strategy. It was never designed to be a verdict. It was designed to be a signal, a loud, sometimes painful signal pointing you toward something that needs attention. The moment you start treating it as information rather than judgment, something shifts. Researchers at the University of California studied a phenomenon they called comparative optimism, where individuals consistently believe they are more likely to experience good outcomes than average while simultaneously rating themselves as more skilled, more moral, and more capable than the average person. This is statistically impossible. Most people cannot be above average on every dimension simultaneously. But the brain generates this perception anyway, as a protective buffer against the weight of constant comparison. Your mind is already trying to protect you. It just does so unevenly, inconsistently, and often in ways that produce their own distortions. The most accurate reading of the comparison impulse, the one most supported by the data, is probably this. Comparing yourself to others tells you nothing certain about your value. It tells you something real about your desires. When you look at someone's life and feel that drop in your chest, what you are actually feeling is the distance between where you are and where some part of you wants to be. The comparison is not the problem. The comparison is the map. It is showing you something you care about, something you have not yet found, or built, or allowed yourself to want openly. Your ancestors used the same feeling to survive. They looked at the strongest member of the group and felt something like longing. And that longing was data. It said, move closer to that. Learn from that. Become something more than what you are right now. Tonight, when you open your phone and feel that quiet drop, you will know what it is now. Not a flaw. Not a failure. A signal that has been running in human beings for 150,000 years. And like every signal, it is asking you to do something with it. The question is whether you will listen to the feeling or follow where it actually points.